She doesn't even know what day it is, Your Honor. She can barely dress herself. My stepmother said it without blinking. She sat 3 feet away from me in that courtroom, wearing my dead father's credit card on her wrist, a Cartier watch he bought her 2 Christmases ago, and she told a judge I was mentally incompetent. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I folded my hands in my lap and counted silently. 14. That was the number of days she had left before she lost everything she had ever stolen from my family. Be honest with me. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and watched every single one of them believe a lie about you? Drop a comment if you know that exact feeling. I want to know how many of us have been through this. Because that morning, in courtroom 4B of the Harris County Probate Court in Houston, Texas, I was surrounded by people who shared my last name, and not a single one of them was on my side. My stepmother, Diane, had been in my life since I was 11. She married my father 8 months after my mother died of pancreatic cancer. She showed up with blonde highlights, a real estate license she never used, and a smile that could charm the skin off a snake. My father, God rest him, was a good man drowning in grief, and Diane threw him a rope that turned out to be a leash. For 17 years, she managed him. She isolated him from his brother, from his college friends, from anyone who might have told him the truth that Diane didn't love him. Diane loved his portfolio. She loved the 4-bedroom house in River Oaks. She loved the lake house in Conroe. She loved the quarterly dividends from the commercial real estate trust my grandfather had built from nothing in 1974. And then, 14 months ago, my father had a stroke. He died in the ICU at Houston Methodist at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand. Diane was in the waiting room, on her phone, calling his financial advisor. I found out 3 things in the week after his funeral. First, my father had updated his will 18 months before he died. He left the house to Diane, but the trust, roughly $4.2 million in commercial property and investment accounts, he left entirely to me. Second, Diane had known about this change for exactly 4 months because she had gone through his desk while he was at a cardiology appointment and found the draft. Third, and this was the one that changed everything, Diane had spent those 4 months slowly siphoning money out of the trust's operating account. Not huge amounts. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Enough to fund a lifestyle she knew was about to end, but not enough to trigger an automatic audit. By the time my father died, she had moved just over $310,000 into accounts I couldn't see. Now here's what most people would do. Most people would scream. Most people would hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit and post about it on social media and call every family member in the phone book. Most people would react. And that's exactly what Diane was counting on. Because Diane didn't just steal money. Diane had a plan. If I reacted emotionally, if I made accusations, if I came unglued in front of the family, she would point to my behavior and say, "See, she's unstable. She's paranoid. She's not fit to manage a fortune. She needed me to look crazy." That was the second phase of the theft. First you take the money, then you take the credibility. Without credibility, nobody believes you when you say the money is gone. It's a move straight out of the narcissist playbook. They don't just hurt you. They set it up so that when you try to tell someone, you sound insane. So I didn't react. I did the opposite. I became invisible. I moved out of the apartment my father had been helping me pay for and into a studio in Montrose that cost $800 a month. I drove my 10-year-old Civic. I wore jeans and t-shirts. I told no one what I had found. I went to the family dinners. I smiled at Diane across the table. I let her pat my hand and say, "Your father would have wanted us to stay close, sweetheart." And every single night, after everyone went home, I sat at my kitchen table with a laptop and a cup of black coffee and I traced every dollar she had touched. See, here's what Diane didn't know about me. She thought I was a mid-level analyst at an accounting firm. Boring job, boring girl, boring life. What she didn't know was that I had spent 6 years working forensic audits for a firm that specialized in fraud detection. I had helped the IRS build cases against people far smarter than Diane. My entire career was about following money through dark hallways until I found the room where it was hiding. She wasn't stealing from a grieving daughter. She was stealing from someone who did this for a living. But I needed more than evidence. I needed her to hang herself with her own rope. So I let her keep stealing. I watched the transfers in real time. I documented every single one with timestamps, IP addresses, and device identifiers. I cross-referenced the destination accounts with corporate filings in Nevada, Wyoming, and Delaware. She had set up 3 shell companies, always 3, like they teach in those scam seminars. One was called Bluebird Properties LLC. Another was Gulf Horizon Consulting. The third, and this one almost made me laugh, was called Legacy Asset Management. She named her theft vehicle Legacy. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. For 5 months, I watched. I compiled. I built a binder that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy, and I waited. Then Diane made her move. She filed a petition for emergency conservatorship, claiming I was mentally incapacitated and unable to manage the trust. She brought a psychologist, a man named Dr. Edwin Marsh, who, it turned out, was her boyfriend's golf buddy who submitted a report he had written without ever examining me. He diagnosed me with severe dissociative disorder and cognitive decline based on what Diane had told him over the phone. Over the phone. He never met me. He never tested me. He wrote a clinical diagnosis of a woman he had never seen based on the word of the woman who was robbing her. And that's how I ended up in courtroom 4B on a Wednesday morning in January, listening to my stepmother describe me as if I were a broken appliance that needed to be unplugged. She's missed bill payments, Diane told Judge Alderman, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she had pre-crumpled in her purse for effect. She forgets conversations. She calls me at 2 a.m., confused about where she is. I'm terrified for her, Your Honor. I made a promise to her father that I would take care of her, and I intend to keep it. Behind her, the gallery was stacked. My father's sister, Aunt Colette, was there with her 2 daughters. A woman I didn't recognize, who I later learned was Diane's hairdresser, brought in purely to fill a seat. They all nodded along, like they were watching a TED Talk. Diane had been working them for months, calls, lunches, tearful voicemails about how worried she was about me. She had turned my family into an audience, and now she was giving them the performance of her life. Her lawyer, a man named Curtis Hambly in a suit that was one size too tight, stood up and addressed the bench. Your Honor, we are requesting immediate appointment of Mrs. Diane Calloway as temporary conservator over the estate of the late Robert Calloway, specifically the Calloway Family Trust, to prevent further financial deterioration caused by the respondent's inability to manage her affairs. Judge Alderman looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen 1,000 liars and was tired of all of them. Miss Calloway, he said, these are serious allegations. Your stepmother is claiming you are unable to care for yourself or manage your finances. How do you respond? The room went quiet. Diane leaned forward. Curtis clicked his pen. Aunt Colette held her breath. They were all waiting for the breakdown. They wanted tears. They wanted confusion. They wanted the helpless little girl Diane had been describing. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my blazer. I looked directly at Diane, not at the judge, not at the gallery, at her. I held her gaze for 3 full seconds without blinking. In psychology, that's called a dominance display. It's what you do when you want someone to know, in their bones, that you are not afraid. Then I turned to the judge and said, I'm listening, Your Honor. I just want to make sure my stepmother is finished. I wouldn't want to interrupt her while she's still under oath. Diane's lip twitched. It was fast a quarter second, but I saw it. She felt the ground shift. She didn't know why yet, but she felt it. Curtis recovered quickly. Your Honor, we have documentation, financial records showing a pattern of neglect and mismanagement. He handed a folder to the bailiff. The trust's operating account has lost over $310,000 in the past 11 months. Exposed transfers to unknown entities. No oversight, no filings. If that isn't evidence of incapacity, I don't know what is. Judge Alderman flipped through the pages. His expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. That's a tell. When a judge stops writing, it means something got their attention. Diane jumped in, unable to help herself. She doesn't even check her statements. Your Honor, I had to find this myself. $300,000? Gone. And she had no idea. What kind of person loses that much money without noticing? The gallery murmured. Aunt Colette whispered something to her daughter. Gerald shook his head. In their minds, the case was already closed. Poor, incompetent girl. Good thing Diane was there to save the day. I let the silence sit for exactly 5 seconds, long enough for the room to settle into its assumptions, long enough for Diane to feel safe. Then I said, Your Honor, may I approach the bench? Judge Alderman nodded. I picked up a black binder from the table. It was thick, maybe 200 pages. I had tabbed it with colored flags, red for financial records, blue for digital forensics, green for corporate filings, yellow for the perjury. I didn't just lose track of $310,000, Your Honor, I said, placing the binder in front of him. I watched every dollar leave. I know exactly where it went, when it went, and who sent it. Diane's face didn't move, but her hands did. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. I turned to the first red tab. These are the wire transfer confirmations from the trust's operating account, I explained. Over the past 11 months, 47 individual transfers were made to 3 separate LLCs, Bluebird Properties, Gulf Horizon Consulting, and Legacy Asset Management. I paused and looked at Diane. All 3 companies were incorporated in Wyoming using a registered agent service. The incorporation documents list a nominee director, but the beneficial owner, the person who actually controls the bank accounts, is listed in the Wyoming Secretary of State's confidential filing. Curtis was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of... I kept going. The beneficial owner of all 3 shell companies is Diane Marie Calloway, my stepmother. The woman sitting right there asking you to give her control of the money she has already been stealing. The courtroom erupted. Aunt Colette gasped loud enough to echo. Gerald leaned forward in his seat. Diane's hairdresser looked like she wanted to disappear. Curtis was saying something, but nobody was listening. That's a lie, Diane snapped, breaking character for the first time. She fabricated that. She's delusional. This is exactly what I've been telling you. She's paranoid, and she makes things up. Judge Alderman raised his hand. The room went silent. He looked at Diane with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was the look of a man who had just realized he was being used as a weapon. He turned to me. Continue, Miss Calloway. I flipped to the blue tab. These are the IP logs from every transfer, I said. Every single one originated from the same device, a Dell Inspiron laptop registered to the home network at 1847 Willow Creek Lane. That is my stepmother's home address, the same home my father left her in his will. Curtis tried again. Your Honor, this evidence hasn't been properly. I turned to the green tab and kept going because I wasn't finished, and Curtis knew it. Here are the bank statements for the 3 shell companies. You'll notice a pattern. Money flows in from the trust, sits for 30 to 60 days, then gets transferred again to a personal brokerage account at Charles Schwab. That brokerage account is held jointly by Diane Calloway and a man named Trevor Fisk. I looked at Diane. Would you like to tell the judge who Trevor Fisk is, or should I? Diane said nothing. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish pulled out of water. Trevor Fisk, I continued, is a real estate agent based in Galveston. He and my stepmother have been in a relationship for approximately 3 years. It began while my father was still alive, while he was recovering from his first cardiac episode. In fact, I have hotel receipts, text message records obtained through legal discovery, and a lease agreement for a beachfront condo in Galveston, co-signed by both of them. A condo purchased with money stolen from my father's trust. The gallery was completely silent, not the uncomfortable silence of before. This was the silence of people who were recalculating everything they thought they knew. Aunt Colette had tears in her eyes. She wasn't looking at Diane. She was looking at me. And for the first time in over a year, she looked ashamed. Judge Alderman closed the binder. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Then he turned to Diane and Curtis with a look that could have frozen the Gulf of Mexico. Mrs. Calloway, he said, his voice low and controlled. Did you file this conservatorship petition knowing that you were the one making those transfers? Curtis grabbed Diane's arm. Don't answer that, but Diane was spiraling. She couldn't stop herself. It's not what it looks like, she blurted. I was managing the funds. Robert told me to. He gave me authority before he died. He wanted me to. He didn't, I said. And I can prove it. I opened the yellow tab. This was the part I had been saving, the part that turned a civil case into a criminal one. My stepmother submitted a document to this court as part of her petition, I said, page 14 of her original filing. It's a letter, supposedly written by my father, granting Diane broad authority over the trust. It's dated 3 months before his death and bears his signature. Curtis went pale. He knew what was coming. I had that letter analyzed by a certified forensic document examiner, I continued. The examiner's report is in this binder. The signature is a digital copy. It was lifted from a different document, a property tax filing from 2023, and pasted onto the letter using image editing software. The metadata in the letter's PDF file shows it was created 4 days after my father's death on a computer registered to Curtis Hambley's law office. Curtis slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. I never. The letter is a forgery, I said, looking at Judge Alderman. Submitted under oath to this court as part of a fraudulent conservatorship petition. That isn't just theft, Your Honor. Under Texas Penal Code Section 37.02, that is aggravated perjury. And under Section 32.46, it's a first-degree felony for securing execution of a document by deception involving a value over $300,000. Judge Alderman stared at Curtis for a long time. Mr. Hambly, he said quietly, did you prepare that document? Curtis was sweating through his shirt. You could see the dark patches spreading under his arms. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The metadata had his fingerprints all over it. Diane turned on him instantly. He told me it would hold up, she hissed, pointing at Curtis. He said no one would check. This was his idea. Curtis flinched like he'd been slapped. The alliance crumbled in real time. Two thieves in a sinking boat, each one trying to throw the other overboard. I didn't want this, Diane said, turning to the gallery. Her voice cracked. She was trying to cry, but it wasn't working. The mask had slipped too far. Robert was going to leave me with nothing. After everything I did for him, 17 years I gave that man. I raised his daughter. I kept his house. You kept his money, I said. That's what you kept. Judge Alderman raised his hand again. He took a long breath, then spoke in the tone of a man handing down a verdict he had already made up his mind about. This court finds no evidence of mental incapacity on the part of the respondent, Miss Calloway. The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, this court is referring the matter of the forged document and the fraudulent petition to the Harris County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. He looked directly at Diane. Mrs. Calloway, I strongly suggest you retain separate criminal counsel. Mr. Hambly will not be able to represent you, as he appears to be a subject of the same investigation. He paused. And Miss Calloway, the younger one? Yes, Your Honor. You mentioned the transfers crossed into multiple state jurisdictions. The shell companies in Wyoming, the brokerage in Texas, the condo in Galveston financed through interstate wire transfers. Yes, Your Honor. He nodded slowly. Then I'll also be making a referral to the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Texas. This may qualify as interstate wire fraud. Diane's face went completely blank. Not angry, not scared. Blank. The blankness of someone who has just realized that the trap they set was actually set for them. I sat down. My hands weren't shaking. My heart rate was steady. I felt the way you feel when you finish a marathon exhausted, but clear. Like every mile had been worth it because you could finally stop running. The courtroom emptied slowly. Aunt Colette approached me in the hallway. She was crying. Sweetheart, she said. I didn't know. She told us she said you were. I know what she said, I replied. I wasn't angry at Colette. I understood. Narcissists don't just manipulate their victims, they manipulate the witnesses. They build an alternate reality so convincing that even good people get trapped inside it. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. Because I needed you to believe her, I said. If you had doubted her, she would have changed her plan. She needed a full audience. She needed everyone in that courtroom nodding along. That was the only way she would feel confident enough to go through with the petition. And the petition was the only thing that put the forgery on the court record, under oath, where it becomes a felony. Colette stared at me. You planned all of this? I planned for the possibility, I said. There's a difference. I walked outside into the January sun. Houston in winter is strange cold enough for a jacket, warm enough to remind you that spring is coming. I stood on the courthouse steps and took the deepest breath I had taken in 14 months. 3 weeks later, Diane was indicted on 6 counts: theft from an estate, forgery, aggravated perjury, securing execution of a document by deception, money laundering, and 1 federal count of wire fraud. Curtis Hambly was indicted separately on 3 counts, including conspiracy and tampering with a government record. Trevor Fisk, the boyfriend, was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. The Galveston condo was seized. The brokerage account was frozen. Every dollar in those shell companies was clawed back into the trust. Diane posted bail. She called me from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should hear what she had to say. You ruined my life, she said. Her voice was flat. No tears, no performance, just venom. No, Diane, I said. You built a house on someone else's land. I just showed up with the deed. She hung up. I blocked the number. Then I blocked 3 more numbers she tried over the next week. Narcissists don't stop when they lose. They just change the angle of attack. But I was done being a target. I sold the lake house in Conroe. I used part of the money to set up a scholarship fund in my mother's name at her alma mater, Prairie View A&M. My mother had been a first-generation college student. She would have liked knowing that her name was opening doors for other women. I kept the trust. I restructured it, fired the old financial advisor who had been too friendly with Diane, and hired a fiduciary who answered only to me. I moved back into a real apartment. I adopted a dog, a three-legged rescue mutt named Verdict, because I thought that was funny, and my therapist said humor was a healthy coping mechanism. Aunt Colette and I had lunch once a month now. It was awkward at first. She carried a lot of guilt for believing Diane. But I told her what my therapist told me, that guilt only helps if you turn it into something. Colette started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helps elderly fraud victims. She was good at it. She had a gentle way of sitting with people who had been betrayed by someone they trusted, probably because she understood the feeling now. The case took 11 months to work through the courts. Diane took a plea deal to avoid trial. She got 6 years, 4 in state custody, 2 on supervised probation. Curtis got 3 years and was disbarred. Trevor Fisk cooperated with the feds and got 18 months of home confinement, which, given that the feds had seized the condo, meant he was confined to his mother's guest bedroom in Beaumont. There is a poetry in that kind of ending that no writer could have invented. On the day of Diane's sentencing, I didn't go to the courthouse. I didn't need to watch. I didn't need closure from a courtroom. I had already gotten mine the day I stood up and opened that binder. Instead, I went to my mother's grave. It's in a small cemetery on the south side of Houston, under a live oak that drops acorns every fall. I sat on the grass and told her everything. I told her about the trust, about Diane, about the forgery, about Verdict, the three-legged dog. I told her that I missed her every day and that I was angry she wasn't here to see me stand up for myself. And then I told her the thing I had never said out loud to anyone. I told her that for 5 months, while I was tracking Diane's theft, while I was building my case, while I was sitting across from that woman at family dinners and smiling, I was terrified. Every single day. I wasn't brave. I was shaking inside. I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, wondering if I was making a mistake, wondering if she would find out, wondering if the family would ever believe me. But I did it anyway, not because I'm fearless, because I decided that being afraid was not a good enough reason to let someone take what my father built and my mother blessed. People think strength is the absence of fear. It's not. Strength is knowing that the person across the table is lying to your face and choosing to sit there, eat your dinner, and wait, because you know that patience is the one weapon they never see coming. Diane was loud. I was quiet. She was fast. I was slow. She played to the crowd. I played to the evidence. And when the curtain finally fell, the audience realized they had been watching the wrong character the entire time. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because somewhere right now, someone is sitting at a kitchen table at 2 a.m., staring at bank statements that don't add up, wondering if they're crazy. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. And you are not alone. Document everything. Tell no one. And when the time comes, walk into that room with your binder and your steady hands and show them exactly who they underestimated. Peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, one page at a time, in a folder they never see coming.